Hello, and welcome to my spoiler review of Aquaman, a movie that's not very spoilery. I know some of you like to watch these spoiler reviews before you see the movie or maybe instead of the movie, and right now you're going to be like, nerds! I thought I was going to get a whole bunch of, tea. I was going to spill the Aquaman, an ocean of tea, but there isn't any. There are no surprise cameos. There are no shocking twists, and not much of an end credit scene. But shockingly, the movie is still amazing. So let's talk about it. And by the way, if you are one of those people who was like, should I see this movie? I'm going to watch the spoiler review. Oh, it doesn't link to the rest of the DCEU. Forget it. You are making a huge mistake. Even if this is an experience, you don't. Even if you know what's going to happen in the movie, I don't think that should preclude you from still seeing it. And so I hope that everyone goes and sees this film. Not just because I'm supportive of DC and would like to see them succeed. And also, when they do something right, I think they should be rewarded, right? But it's just a great movie, and I want you to have that. I want you to have that great time at the movies. All right. So the most impressive thing about the film is just how damn beautiful it is. From the VFX to the locations. Like, if you're going to introduce someone to the surface world and try to win them over, as Arthur does with Mera, well, he's talking up the surface world and then he lucks out, basically. Because Arthur's not that complicated a guy. We'll get into that in a good way. But yeah, take her to a seaside town on the cliffs of Italy, in Sicily, Italy. That'll do it. I was like, this place is so gorgeous. And James Wan, a lot of it, they scouted, and a lot of it is a real location. And they should have I guess I'll try and Google it and see if I can find it. But I would like to go to there. All right, so as for the VFX, they are impressive in two regards. The first is that they are super believable. This way of filming dry for wet, they've done it, like in the last Pirates of the Caribbean movie, they worked on the hair, Javier Bardem's hair flowing when he was out of the water. But I mean, in terms of shooting underwater sequences, not in a water tank, but with harnesses, they did a lot of that for Justice League. And so they did a lot of the groundwork there. And it's really come to fruition with this film. It's incredibly convincing. Every time they were underwater, I believe they were underwater, and it just looked absolutely spectacular. It was great. As I said in my non-spoiler review, eat your heart out, little live-action Little Mermaid movie. I think if I were Disney, I'd just be like, let's just suck it up and go over there and ask if we, or I guess, buy off, give them, make them an offer they can't refuse, the VFX people who worked on this movie. If I were Bob Iger, I would be like, get me the names of everyone who worked VFX on these scenes in Aquaman. I want them. He'll do his best Orm. All right. And also, by the way, to be able to swim like an Atlantean, some of the underwater turns and twists they were doing. And I loved when they would decide to go turbo. They'd be like, oh, let's go. And they just go it was like a muscle reflex almost. And they would just shoot off. I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. I don't know how Arthur figured out how to do it so quickly. Willem Dafoe's character, Vulko, was just like, and now you do this. And Arthur was like, oh yeah. And I was like, I think it would take a couple of tries, but maybe it's just that easy if you're an Atlantean. It was fantastic though. It looked amazing. Swimming with the dolphins like you saw from the trailer, so great. And then also the VFX choices are incredibly artistic, with not only an amazing attention to detail, but lots of artistic flourish. Even like the beginning, when they had the Warner Brothers logo kind of like half embedded like in a rock or like in a sunken ship. It was such a great choice with barnacles all over it. I was like, thank you for the theming. Now, several sequences in this movie are practically an out-of-body experience. They're just so perfect. You're like, what am I watching? All right, so the tidal wave at the beginning. I like the way Jason Momoa looked past his sleeping or passed out dad in the car and was like, what the what? That was great. And it was truly terrifying to see. I liked entering Atlantis and the way, I love the little details. They did it. World building is tough. And sometimes in world building in movies, you're like, nice try. I don't believe that for a second. It's just so sloppy. But here, I'd be like, I do believe you're entering data into that machine. Or when they were entering Atlantis, Mera was like, oh, don't worry, I have diplomatic immunity. And I'm like, oh, that would work. Or they're like, oh, those are the hydro cannons. And I was like, oh, those are so cool. It was just great. Everything was awesome. Then also the duel between Arthur and Orm. That was an amazing For the Ages sequence. I was just on the edge of my seat. And also just, again, all of these sequences, like, how can this be so perfect? Then the trench, and I like the slight horror turn that this took. And the music, we'll talk about the music in a second, but the music changed in particular with the trench, and I thought that was fabulous. It was really creepy and just, it was great. Like, they really did the idea of a swarm beautifully. Although I did like, just like in Finding Nemo, they had all the fish spell out Aquaman at the beginning of the film, speaking of a swarm. And then also the Hidden Sea, where they had dinosaurs, and also Arthur's mom. We'll talk about Arthur's mom when we get to Nicole Kidman. And then getting the gold trident. That whole sequence was so cool. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to the Aquaman section, but I just thought the whole thing was beautifully done. And the huge battle at the end. There were a couple moments when they would just switch to like from camera angles, and they'd be like, oh, we're on top of the battle, oh, now we're seeing Orm on top of his Tylosaur, and I would just be like, you know how hard it is? Like, it seems so simple, but it's so difficult to choreograph this, and because it's visual effects, everything has to be built and meticulously planned in advance, and I appreciated the heck out of all the hard work that was done. It was fabulous. And as you can see, I spent a lot of this movie out of my body, in awe of how good it was. And in each of the scenes that I just mentioned, the score heightens the experience with just the perfect music. Not just what you would want to hear at that moment, but with an inventive twist. I really, as I said in my non-spoiler review, it reminded me a lot of Blade Runner. But it was not derivative of Blade Runner. It was just that cool. Then I also appreciate the film's message about don't pollute the ocean, because it's a real problem, by the way. Google like trash island in the Pacific and you will be appalled. But I like that Orm used the tidal waves in his warning to throw back all the warships and all the garbage that we've dumped into the ocean. I was like, touche, Orm, you've got a point. I thought it was very effective. And I thought that Mera had some interesting things to say, but the movie doesn't hit you over the head with it. It's not like, surprise, environmental movie. It was like, as long as you're here and we're in the ocean, just would like to remind you that we're kind of a jerk to it. So think about that. And you're like, I will. And then we move on. I think the movie also feels if you like Aquaman and Atlantis, that too will help you not want to pollute the ocean. Don't make Mera get caught in a soda can holder. So I thought that was good. Although I did think it was weird that only Dr. Shin realized that it was the warships and the garbage that had been thrown back. He was like, he's making a point. And the newscasters were like, oh, silly Dr. Shin, weren't you fired? And I was like, but what he's saying makes a lot of sense. This movie is very effective in that, even though I thought about that for a second, it didn't bother me. So the movie got away with it. But when people like to make lists of things that are wrong with movies, they're going to touch on that for sure. Now, as for the rest of the spoiler review, as usual, we're going to go character by character. Usually I go by my characters in order of which ones I like the best, but I really kind of liked all the characters, and I think that it's better for the discussion to kind of discuss them, in order of importance and how they play into the movie. So obviously we're going to start with Aquaman. All right, so in the submarine, when he was fighting the pirates, I was like, whoa, this guy has like a Batman level of violence. And I was taken back by it. Like when he hit Black Manta's head into like one of the torpedoes, I was like, I think you might have given that man a concussion. I think this is a little bit overkill, Arthur Curry. But Batman would have been like, I like this guy. But then, speaking of the submarine sequence, I thought it was a lot of fun. At that point in the movie, as I said in my non-spoiler review, I thought the beginning was a little wonky. And at that point, I was like, well, every kid in the world should at least see this movie because it's awesome in that regard. But where it started to really pick up for me was the conversation that Jason Momoa's Arthur had with Black Manta and his father. When, he jeopardized the dad. And then Black Manta's like, no, Dad! Black Manta did that way too much. But then Arthur was like, this is your son? You should be ashamed. And I was like, oh, like terse but effective, Arthur. I like it. A man of few words, but it gets the job done. And then also when they were leaving and Black Manta's like, you got to save my dad. Arthur looked back and said, you killed innocent men. And they showed all their bodies, their bloodless bodies, but still, and also Black Manta had just run the captain of the ship through with a sword for seemingly, I felt, no reason. Just because he wanted to, get his reputation out there, as he said. Some of the earlier dialogue was so bad. And Arthur says, ask the ocean for forgiveness. And I was like, well, I've got to see where Arthur's coming from here. I mean, I guess because he's a good... And I mean, as Arthur found out, he created an even greater enemy that day. So he's like, maybe I should have saved... He actually did say, maybe I should have saved his dad. But he had other reasons as well. But, I liked that. I thought that was interesting. And I liked making Arthur a little bit more complicated. But then it was the script that won, and Jason Momoa did a good job with that stuff, by the way. And then it was the script that won me over because it didn't make Aquaman a joke, despite Jason Momoa's best efforts. He's a silly guy, boy. But I think that James Wan in the script uses him like a tool very well. But as he's portrayed here, he's a very good fighter. I like that he knew his history. You know, when he and Mera were looking for the lost trident and they had to find out where to put the, you know, Indiana Jones style, where to put the bottle. I liked that it was a message in a bottle. I just like that stuff. I thought that was great. In the next movie, they have to have a treasure chest somewhere, like a literal treasure chest. But I like that he could contribute, and not always by accident either. You know, like, you know, when he dies, like when she says, you do your best thinking when you're not thinking at all. Well, he didn't really figure that out, but here he did figure it out, and I thought that was great. I also like that he had a character arc, that he went from being, you know, angry and alone to seeing how that isolation was having a ripple effect, speaking of water, that, you know, was hurting other people that he loved or could love, you know, if he got out more, as he did, and he met the love of his life. I really liked the Mera and Arthur romance. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, so I also liked the hero versus king distinction. Now, we've all heard the first part of the line in the trailer, but here they said that a king fights for his people and his country and for himself, you know, for his little corner of the world. But a hero fights for everyone. And I was like, oh, that's great. I love that so much. And they divided it, actually. Mera doesn't say the whole line. Mera says Atlantis has always had a king and, you know, needs something more. And then Arthur, as you know, says, well, what could be more than a king? And it's his mother that says a hero. And I thought that was great. It's like, you got some nice women in your life there, Arthur. Good for you. So Arthur has no code. He has no agenda. He's a simple man who simply does what's right. I think even more, in a more simple way than Superman would, you know, because, you know, you're trying to think, you know, you're thinking Justice League during this movie because it's so good. You're like, yes, we're getting there. So you're like, well, how is Aquaman going to distinguish himself from the other Justice Leaguers besides the obvious being his, you know, his powers, etc., and where he comes from? And I think to that degree, I think, you know, Superman does have a code. You know, I think Superman does have a world view, but I think Arthur doesn't. He's just like, what's right here and now. He's a very simple guy. And I like that. I thought it was really good. They got me to understand Jason Momoa's Aquaman. That's what this movie did, particularly in the third act. So happy the third act was good. A lot of times there are great movies these days, comic book movies, and you love the first 2/3, and then you start to lose interest a little bit, you know, after you've watched it a couple of times at the end. That is not the case here. Some of the most important things happen in the third act, like him becoming Aquaman. And that final leg of the journey, I like that he had to take it alone. You know, that Mera and his mother were like, the reasoning is that only the true king could get in there. But I like that the movie set it up that, you know, he had a lot of help along the way, but it was important for him to do it himself. And his humbleness was what won the day. Also, that he could understand the Carathan, voiced by Julie Andrews, in a line when she was like, you can understand me? And I was like, that's what Detective Pikachu just said in his own trailer. He was shocked when a human could understand him. So I was like, parallels everywhere. You know, I'm sure that the Detective Pikachu, and also both parties, I'm sure, were like, nerds when they heard that they both had that line. But I really liked that moment when he got the trident finally. So he had his great humble moment, and I was like, you should give him the trident, Julie Andrews. So he got it. And then they had him hold it up to his eyes, and he sent out like his waves, his Aquaman waves. And it was so cool because his eyes lit up even more gold. And I was like, if there's one thing you want to emphasize on Jason Momoa, we've already done the hair, we've already done the muscles, but he does have really amazing eyes and cool eyebrows. So to highlight them like that, I was like, you're getting the most out of Jason Momoa here. Like, wow, again, way to use Jason Momoa. And then at the end, so at the very end, when he gets into the battle and he emerges riding the Carathan and he's in his traditional Aquaman suit, I have to say, when I saw him in that moment, I said to myself, yeah, that's Aquaman. And that was the moment for me that I was, as I said, case closed. Jason Momoa is Aquaman. Change it I want to see it changed everywhere because he deserves the respect. Speaking of Julie Andrews, she really brought it. She was very good at being an evil, moody Carathan. I mean, they used voice modulation on her for sure, but still, the inflection that she did was excellent. I was like, Julie Andrews, you are irreplaceable. And then when the Carathan stormed into battle, I was thinking in my head, ooh, Julie Andrews is ticked off. You wouldn't like Julie Andrews when she's mad. And so that was fun. Then next, Mera. Mighty is the movie that could make me like Amber Heard, but I thought she was great here. She's been going around the past couple of days saying, oh, I'd love to have my own spin-off movie, or I'd love to be in a movie with Wonder Woman. I'm like, oh, would you, Amber Heard? Who wouldn't? But now, having seen the film, I actually think she could. She was fantastic. Also, it helped that she looked absolutely gorgeous in every single frame of the movie, and a really good gorgeous that I think appeals to men and women. That's what you want to achieve. She looks very sexy, but in a friendly, relatable, like, oh, how can I get that look kind of way. That's what Marilyn Monroe so famously did, and they did it very well here. And I was glad that Amber Heard, didn't try and sex pot up Mera as she's done some of her other roles. And I thought I'm glad. I don't know if that was her choice or if maybe James Wan was like, psst, stop doing that. But I'm glad, no matter how it came to be, I'm glad that it did. Also, her hydrokinesis. Oh, I loved it so much. It's an amazing power to have, and it's so wonderfully realized in live action. Also, it's so powerful. And I like the power of the ocean, how it was portrayed throughout the movie. Like, you really felt the force of the water, I thought, and the might of the ocean. Like, truly, you were like, this is a pretty nice kingdom. Usually you're like, who wants the oceans? But now you're like, oh, yeah, those are pretty good. Maybe I could see why Orm wants them so bad. And then also, though, I liked it when she was in Sicily and she used the wine, because it was a liquid in the bottles to fight back in one scene. I thought that was really cool and showed that hydrokinesis is all liquid. And so good for her for, especially since she was new to the world for getting that. Side note, I thought the Pinocchio gag was cute. I liked hiding in the whale's mouth that, Arthur Curry thought of that. But she was like, you got it from a kid's book. And the most interesting thing to me was he was like, oh no, I didn't know this was a book. I just remember the movie. And I was like, did you just reference a Disney movie? How big of you, Warner Brothers DC. Good for you. All right, so they never explained why she was the only one who had hydrokinesis. Now, in the comics, everyone, for example, can have it. Like, all of King Nereus' soldiers should have been able to do hydrokinesis. But I think the movie was like, that's a little bit too expensive for us to have everyone do it. And hey, give us a break. We did it perfectly with Mera. And I am giving them a break. But it was weird to me that Arthur never asked and was like, how can you do that? And like, why can no one else? And can I learn as the one true king? I mean, I would want that power for sure. Although I also liked, and again, the movie got away with it though. I mean, it's like something you think about afterwards. And also, I like the small moments with Mera. She was so Ariel in The Little Mermaid. Like when she loved the roses and she thought they smelled nice, but then she saw some people eating some food, so she ate the roses. And I thought that Jason Momoa as Arthur was very sweet, that he was like, okay, I'll eat them too, so you don't have to feel bad. It was a very Jason Momoa moment. He had some nice little touches that were totally his own, and so it was nice that he could contribute to the movie as an actor and didn't just have to be puppeted all over the thing. All right, then their kiss. What a kiss! This is one of the best on-screen movie kisses I've ever seen. Mera made the first move. I thought it was a very subtle change to the way movie kisses are done in the post, Me Too situation. Jason Momoa is such like a man, and he's like such a force of nature on and off screen that you think he'd be like, hey, you're looking at me that way. I feel that way about you. Let's do something. But instead they made his character extremely respectful of Mera. Like all he really did ever was hold her hand and like look out for her. But so she decided to make the first move, but they were going off. He might die, so this was like the one. So I guess what I'm saying, if it didn't work out, it wouldn't be too embarrassing to her. The circumstances warranted her making such a strong first move, but she did, and it was amazing because their hair and their bodies intertwined underwater. They made underwater makeout sessions look real good. It's like. I mean, I don't know if anyone could duplicate that because you'd have to hold your breath for so long and you'd have to be like really far underwater. But, it was really well done. It was very impressive. I mean, I loved it, as you can see. And also at the end, Jason Momoa, I guess because now he knew that it was okay, he felt like, oh yeah, we're going to be in a relationship. And I like that all he needed was the okay. Because he gave her this really sweet kiss on her forehead at the end when he'd won at the end of the day. I don't know if you caught that or not, but it was done so second natured, like he just genuinely really liked her. I thought it was great. I really liked their relationship a lot. All right, then next, Orm, aka Ocean Master. And every time at my screening someone said Ocean Master, this one person in my audience laughed. They were like, Ocean Master sounds ridiculous. And I was like, and I really wanted to turn around and be like, I think they've explained quite well in the script what Ocean Master means, and that it was a level, like a general or some kind of person in the military. It was a post you could rise to if you got all of the kingdoms that were remaining under your command. And that would make Orm the Ocean Master. So I don't know why this person was laughing. It was driving me crazy. But anyway, Patrick Wilson really nailed this. He was great. Favorite Patrick Wilson moments. I loved his Tylosaur dismount when he was fighting the surface dwellers with that obviously staged submarine attack. I'll talk about that with King Nereus. But he was on every time he was on the Tylosaur, I was like, that was so cool. But after he did his strike, and that was really cool too, the way he ran his trident along the side of the sub and then took out the propeller. I mean, the sub really wasn't fighting back because it was secretly his, but it was still very cool. He put on a good show. But then when he was wanted to survey the damage he'd done, he just dismounted the Tylosaur, floated in midair and turned around while the Tylosaur just kept going and then turned around and was like, I'm coming. It was they did it so perfectly. Talk about seeming second nature. It just seemed really natural. I just thought it was great. And it was I love that level of thinking of how you would conduct yourself underwater. Then I also loved the throne room discussion when he confronted his half-breed brother and Aquaman was in chains. I thought Patrick Wilson played that really well. And, baiting Jason Momoa to accept the challenge, steering him in that direction. It was really good. And he even pulled it off wearing the stupid crown they put him on him. I was like, that's hideous. Maybe that's because he knew that Mera, well, he didn't know Mera, I don't think, but he knew Vulko had betrayed him. I was like, was that when you knew, when Vulko told you that crown looked good? He's like, yeah, that's when I knew. But I also loved when he realized that Mera liked Arthur. That made me laugh out loud at my screening when he gave Mera a gift to his betrothed, and then she stole a glance at Arthur, and Arthur looked at her, and then Ocean Master was like, "Oh, so that's another reason to hate this guy." I love that. Also, speaking of their discussion before the big fight, I did like what Arthur said to him. He's like, "I dreamed of meeting you and meeting my little brother and telling him he wasn't alone in the world, and little did I know he'd grow up to be such a jerk." Well, I'm editing Jason Momoa's language, but that was a really nice line. And it was great. And then also I loved the Aqua hologram that Orm used to talk to Black Manta, who was working for him. I thought that was nice. A little Obi-Wan Kenobi, I need your help action there. But this was full-sized, which was also cool. And then I loved at the end the smile that he had on his face when he got to live. He was like, "You're going to let me live? Hot damn, see you guys soon." It was great. I mean, speaking of Royal Intrigue 101, you execute your enemies because they always rise again to get you. But this is still a family movie, so obviously you can't. I mean, although Orm, Jimon Hansu, he's not in this movie for a very long time. He got gutted like a fish. And so I guess they did have some killing. But I thought it was amazing they let Orm live. I guess because it is his half-brother, but I was like, I'd chain him up real good, boy. That guy, he's going to get out. And the other thing I liked about Orm is that usually the blonde rich kid villain in movies is stupid. But Orm knows what he's doing. And I thought that was great. You want a good villain. And on that note, Black Manta didn't really work out, at least not yet. Way too emotional, as I said, way too much. "No, Dad, and I'm gonna get Aquaman." I was like, calm down, stop leading with here and leading with here. That's how you're gonna get him. And my biggest problem with him is that that the Aquamarines waited around for him to make his armor. I thought that was ridiculous. They gave him a nice, classic Atlantean suit of armor, and he had to make it his own, So they had this whole montage man for Robot Chicken fans. And he took apart, I don't know how he had the ability to take apart other people's technology and repurpose it, in what seemed to be maybe 24 hours. I'd be like, just put this on and let's go. I wouldn't be. I don't have time for you to make this to personalize this. It was ridiculous. So I didn't like that. And I also it was one of the few times in the movie I just found it unbelievable. Also, the end credit with Dr. Shin. Basically they're going to team up and go fight Aquaman. And Dr. Shin was like, "Is this Atlantean technology?" Whatever. That was it. I don't know why Dr. Shin plays his own news clips, by the way, either, but he does. Also, speaking of Dr. Shin. Why can't Randall Park get more screen time? This is the second time this year that I was excited for some Randall Park goodness because I'm a big Randall Park fan, only to have him criminally underused. He's so funny. All right, then Murk. Ludi Lin, his albino look does a lot of his work for him, to be fair. But his action scenes, all the action scenes with the Aquamarines were incredibly well done. They might look like stormtroopers, but they have much better aim. Far more effective. As I wrote in my notes, they might be wearing pastels, but they mean business. I didn't like the toilet gag, though, with Ludi Lin, because, he was one of, apparently only the upper class Atlanteans can breathe both air and water, but Murk is one of those that can only breathe water. So to take them out, Mera would hurt their suits, which kept some water in there for them to breathe from. Although you would think they would run out of it, or they would suck. I guess they only have a couple of hours, but, are you just like rebreathing the same water? I guess we're doing that with oxygen. For some reason, it seems grosser with water. Like you're just in the same puddle for like a couple of hours. But he needed water to breathe. So he was looking for a source of water, and he was in a home, because they were in Italy, that town, and he saw a toilet. So he stuck his head in the toilet so he could breathe. And I was like, oh, he was such a cool character. I don't know if he quite needed to. It wasn't funny enough to make it worth the personal indignity to Murk. As for King Nereus, Dolph Lundgren was fine. He was just basically Mera's dad. But I was glad they didn't make him too naive. Like when that submarine attacked his meeting with Ocean Master Orm, I was like, this is so convenient. Are you really just going to throw in with Orm so easily? And that's basically what Mera says to him. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I'm just looking for an excuse to go to war too. So I appreciated that detail. Then, finally, Nicole Kidman. Willem Dafoe was fine. We don't really talk about him. He's just, it's Willem Dafoe with a top knot. But Nicole Kidman, she was really well cast. She looks a lot like both Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson. I believed she was the missing link between the two of them. But her intro scenes, they were a little sloppy. Not her fault, but they were a little sloppy in how they were written. And especially when she first came onto the scene. Although when she woke up and saw the dog, she did that very well. And also Mera did when she was in the plane and saw the chicken. They sold both those moments very nicely. But it reminded me a lot with Nicole Kidman of Splash. It was like Splash Light. And come to think of it, why didn't they cast Daryl Hannah? That would have been a great nod to that iconic film. But they have Nicole Kidman. And speaking of other actresses, though, at the end of the movie, when Nicole Kidman comes back to Atlantis, they put her in all these heavy robes. And with the white hair they'd given her, the grayish white hair, they turned her into Blythe Danner. I was like, if you wanted Blythe Danner, you should have hired Blythe Danner. Let Nicole Kidman be Nicole Kidman. So I was a little disappointed in her look once she got back to Atlantis. I was like, where is the Atlantean fashion designer? They're going to be very disappointed in the way what you've done to her. They'd be like, we need to fix this immediately. Makeover scene. But she did survive. So basically, she was sacrificed to the trench, fought her way out the exact same way that Aquaman and Mera do, which wasn't that hard. I'm like, did you discover light too? By the way, with the trench, the idea that it was the red flares that created the light was such a great visual choice. It just made the scene all the more cool. It was great. But, there's no way that Nicole Kidman's character had the flares because she was sacrificed by Atlanteans. So I don't know how she survived, but it didn't, I got to say, the bark is worse than their bite for the trench. But I liked when Aquaman was controlling the trench. Like, he controls the trench! And they're like, oh, he does. It was great. But by the way, some of the Atlanteans really devolved. I'd be like, wow, this is something to study right there. Like, how did you guys, some of you just went like way off the reservation. But so she survived, and she lived in this little hidden sea pocket with dinosaurs and beautiful gems. Basically, she crossed over into How to Train Your Dragon: The Lost World. It was exactly like that, down to her having armor that looked a lot like Cate Blanchett's character. But it was so she could hide as a trench person. It made her look like a trench person. But it reminded me of How to Train Your Dragon. That's how she couldn't get the trident because only the true king could get it. Sexist much? I'd be like, oh, my ancestors, you've left me stranded in this stupid hidden sea just because I have 2 X chromosomes, you jerk. But so anyway, she couldn't get the trident to get out of there, so that's why she had never come back to Aquaman's pops. And they had a nice little reunion at the end of the movie that Nicole Kidman in particular really sold. But you know what really surprised me the most when we saw her, besides how much it was like How to Train Your Dragon? That she had nail polish somehow in the hidden sea. I was like, wow. She's like, I made it out of something here. I was like, that's very impressive. And then also, she seemed to not have aged at all, except for now having grayish hair. And it made me wonder, was that a choice of the film, or does Nicole Kidman actually look that good? I even looked up some photos of her, some paparazzi photos, like from red carpets and stuff, when I got out of the movie, when I was, editing. And I can't quite tell, because I have to, I don't know if you know this or not, but a lot of actors in regular movies have like a like a little polish done to how they look these days, just to make them look a little bit better in the movie. And and even the actors who say they don't want to do it, once they see that other actors in the cast have had it done, they're like, well, you better do it to me too, because I look ridiculous standing next to that person you just smoothed out. So I'm not sure. That's how good technology has gotten. But it seems that Atlanteans don't age at the same rate as humans. So it looks like Wonder Woman might not be so alone anymore. And why didn't she think of that? She should have been like, they've been like, there's a whole group of people for you to hang out with. See, all your little petty squabbles. Although I would love to see the Amazons versus the Atlanteans. That would be quite the battle. All right, I'm sure, hopefully, another day. So honestly, I feel this movie is just shy of a perfect blockbuster film, comic book movie. I really, really liked it. Now, some of you might be like, oh, is it as good as Black Panther? Is it as good as Wonder Woman, like from an Oscar perspective? It doesn't have the social importance of those movies. Those movies have a representational factor that puts them over the top in that regard. Aquaman doesn't have that, but it doesn't need it. It's just good. It's just a really, really good movie. I compared James Wan to Steven Spielberg in my non-spoiler review, and I fully believe that comparison. This is like an Indiana Jones, like that kind of a movie. Imagine if Spielberg wasn't so silly with his nuking the fridge idea. Imagine what he could do with Indiana Jones today, if they ever make Indiana Jones 5. All right, and also, I think this movie has a huge rewatchability factor, so I hope that it does very well at the box office. That gives it a bit of an edge. How many times do you plan to see it? Write your thoughts down below. That's my spoiler review of Aquaman. I can't wait to hear what you think about it. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.